when I really think about it, reflecting on the past year, like obviously I was friends with Mike and was very conscious of how talented and smart and all of that stuff that he was. But I'm, to be honest, in real time, I didn't realize the type of effect that he was having on people. That's what really comes into focus for me in the past year. Just my own little world that I brought Michael into on the sports side when he passed, obviously so suddenly and so tragically. So many people reached out to me that were introduced to Michael's work via our thing and was just like, this guy made me do a 180, 100%. Like my mind was changed about the way I need to be thinking about politics and our world by this dude because of his way of communicating. And that's what, that's really what I think about in the last year is like, the magnitude of what this guy was doing was lost on me in real time. And, I have a greater appreciation for it now, being able to look back in retrospect. And I think, what I really learned too, just talking to more and more people who were close to Mike, like I was, I think what really resonated with people and still resonates with people is the sort of moral and ideological clarity and coherence. I think we're in a moment right now where people on the left are carrying pitchforks to get people fired from jobs for tweets from 10 years ago, right? Because it might be racially insensitive, right? And I think what Mike was doing a good job at was, if we're gonna sort of center an identity, then it can't be something as amorphous as race or even gender. We're learning is amorphous. Like we can't center it on that. We got to center it on something more concrete, which is why I think he was always banging and hammering the sort of class struggle in America and in the world, right? And I think to me, that's the biggest thing I take away from it. It's like, well, I don't know that we want a world where people can just be fired for 10-year-old tweets. Like, even if they say things that we happen to not be, we don't think of the right buzzwords, or you don't talk about gender non-binary people in the right way, and you said the wrong pronoun, or you used the word that might be racially insensitive to Black people, or whatever the case may be. I don't know that we want to live in a world where you can get fired for for a tweet, because man, it should be really hard for a person to lose their job, right? When you living in America where there's no social safety net, nobody takes care of you. The only way for you to survive is a job. And so therefore, if that's the only way people can get by in this place, we should not be pushing for a world in which people can very easily lose the only thing that's keeping them from destitution. Like that's easy to understand, right? And I think that's what Mike was doing a great job at, was explaining what really should truly matter to folks. And, at the same time, I think other things that I learned about Mike was, I would talk to him about like being image conscious, right? And I think it's a part of the same sort of idea of meeting people where they live, in the sense that people respond to certain images. So if we want to get our message through to people, it can't just be like, all right, we've read volumes of books and done study and research, and so therefore you should receive my message. That's not how people operate, right? Like you want to present everything that you're trying to get across to people in a manner that they can internalize and receive. And Mike was always thinking about that, how to better communicate the message and the work, right? Which is, again, these are all things that I think about all the time now. It's like, it's not enough that you're quote unquote right or wrong. Like that's so beyond the point, right? And I think especially on the left, we're so obsessed with people, the most well-studied, the most academic, blah, 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 blah. But on the other side, rest in power, Rush Limbaugh, I think what that guy understood was, I'm going to meet people where they live. I'm going to get through to them. Sure, we don't agree with his message, but he understood that it goes beyond being quote unquote right or wrong. It's about effectively communicating to folks. And, you know, I don't want to evoke Rush Limbaugh in a remembrance of Mike, but I think Mike could even understand what Rush Limbaugh was good at, as evil as some of the messages that he was getting through. Even somebody like Mike could identify, all right, this is what he's doing that's working. What can we take from that to get our thing across to people? Because, you know, and I think there was an optimism in Mike about, I think there's a lot of pessimism now about what's in people's hearts and minds. And, you know, I don't know that we could, maybe it just is, right? Maybe this fatalistic, deterministic, like, all right, well, we just live in a bad racist country. You know, another thing I admired about Mike was just his optimism, to be able to get through to people despite all of these differences and all the ways that folks are being propagandized, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I think about is the optimism, the clarity of the message, and just an emotional intelligence and understanding of people and giving them what they want. You know what I'm saying? Like, if people want good looking people on their TV talking about things, all right, cool. Let's get good looking people up there talking about leftist politics. All right. Let's give the people what they want so that we can ultimately end up in a place that's most advantageous for most of us.
How did you guys meet? Like, what was the how did you end up working together?
So I'll never get tired of telling the story because it's really remarkable, and it comes full circle because I'm working at the Ringer for Bill Simmons, and so this is going to be a little bit long-winded, but I do want to tell this through line for you guys because in a roundabout way, Bill Simmons turned me into a leftist. So Bill Simmons founded Grantland, right? And he has this guy named Charlie Pierce on there, who I just thought was a beautifully eloquent writer. And they're like, yo, at the bottom of his joint, it says he writes sports for us, but he does politics for Esquire. So I say, oh, let me go check out his politics stuff. And I loved it. It was brilliant. It was like right around the time of Barry's second campaign, right? I'm like, wow, this guy is great. And then he blogs about this little show on MSNBC on the weekends called Up with Chris Hayes, where he's like, yo, it's not the same Sunday show, parade of gas bags. It's like real normal people on MSNBC talking about the politics that affect normal people on this guy's show on the weekends. Y'all should check it out. So I became a sort of acolyte of the Chris Hayes thing at MSNBC. Then, of course, Chris Hayes blows up. He gets his primetime show, and he has a guest on his show named Sam Seder, who on MSNBC is like a damn flamethrower, right? Like, Sam is a fire-breathing dragon in that setting. And it's like, well, he's the host of this YouTube show called The Majority Report. I'm like, all right, cool. Let me start watching this guy's YouTube show. And of course, I start loving it. And Mike is sort of your sidekick, chiming in every now and again. And, you know, at that time, he was doing Michael Mondays.
Yeah.
And to be honest with the audience, I was like, I'm not watching Michael Mondays. I'm like, I'm not watching Sam's Lackey on Sam's day off. I'm not watching that. Sorry. But one day I did watch Michael Monday.
Stop the story right there.
And so one day I did watch Michael Monday, and I was like, wow, this guy is freaking hilarious. He's brilliant. This is hilarious. And, you know, he told the joke that he's become very famous for, which is his Nation of Islam 5%er Barack Obama character that he invented. And I was just blown away by this because it was just so brilliantly thought out because, you know, and it says everything you need to know about Mike. It's like, some people know what Islam is. Some people know about the Nation of Islam and what they teach. Not a lot of people know about an offshoot of the Nation of Islam called the 5%er Nation, which is which was very prevalent in New York City, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the joke Mike was saying. He's like, these idiots on Fox think that Barry is this like hard, like he's the most milquetoast center person you could ever think of, but they treat him like he's literally like he's Farrakhan type of figure. And so the joke was just so brilliant to me because I was at the time I was thinking about the 5%ers a lot because like Jay-Z was running around New York City and like a bunch of 5%er like jewelry and all of this. and whatever. So at the time, I was obsessed with the topic of this like fringe, quasi-religious group, and Mike makes a joke about it on the show. So I reached out to him on Twitter, and I was like, "That is one of the funniest things I've literally ever seen in my life." And at the time, I had just gotten started in doing this sports media stuff, right? And so I was, getting my little footing, amassing a little baby following, whatever. And Mike hit me up immediately and was like, "Yo, let's get together. Let's get a beer in Brooklyn one day." And so we did that, and we were friends basically ever since. We hung out for like 2-3 hours at some little bar in like Clinton Hill, I believe it was. And we became friends ever since. We stayed in touch. We would always try to hang out as much as we could. He would have me on Majority Report, of course, TMBS, all kinds of stuff. And that's the story, Sam.
That's a good story. I didn't realize there's a lot of Worcester in that. I don't know if you realized that. Charlie Pierce has got a lot of Worcester family, and Simmons went to Holy Cross.
Yeah. Big Massachusetts energy.
Yeah. Michael, of course, from Western Mass. I mean, it's not really
not
Mass.
Worcester, but
it's not really.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're west of Fitchburg, forget it. But no, that's a great story. Yeah, I mean, he obviously. I mean, it's that really, I think, encapsulates a lot of like what Michael brings. I think a lot of people. I mean, that's the thing, is that I think Michael would have really appreciated to see how important he was to so many different people, that it's, I don't know that he had a full grasp of that, while he was alive. I don't think he could have really.
Well, Sam, you could speak to this, and everybody who's in our line of work can speak to this, is that sometimes it feels like we're just speaking into the void.
Definitely.
It's like, is anybody even like listening to this? Like internalizing it? Like, does it even freaking matter? Like it can really feel like that all the time, right? Because you can't, however many people are listening to this, or however many people
abstraction
podcast that I'm doing, there's no way for me to actually interact with them and be like, one by one, like, what do you get from this? How's it actually affecting you? Et cetera, et cetera. You just, I don't know. You do what you do, and you hope that it's penetrating, right? And so, of course, I'm sure that was Mike as well, right? Like, we had a sort of remembrance for him here in LA with Leisha not too long ago. And I remember telling people, I was like, look, as successful as TMBS had become, I remember talking to Mike and him being like, yeah, but we're not Chapel Trap House yet. You know what I mean? It's like, as wildly successful as what he was doing was, it's always like, man, but am I doing enough? Are we big enough? Are we reaching enough people? Like, that's always, that's always been the feeling. But yeah, I don't know that if he got a sense of how many people he impacted. And like I said, again, I don't want to say completely oblivious to it, because, like stuff like the live show that he did in LA, to see the response and the people and the crowd and the way that, like, the genuine appreciation for the work that he was doing. I was like, wow, I was like, Matt, you guys are still putting something pretty freaking neat together here. I love it, so you can get a little bit glimpse of it, but I didn't understand in the moment. It was only afterwards, just the outpouring of people reaching out and the support, and people just being like, look, not that they were, they were listening to Hannity and reading Michelle Malkin before Mike, but like that they just weren't as connected to the core issues as they now had become because of consuming the work that Mike did. And I think that's just a testament to his understanding that you got to make people laugh, that you got to have an open heart and stop being so damn judgmental about people, and understanding that we're all humans. We all have frailties. Nobody's perfect. Your coalition ain't going to be perfectly, moralistic and all of that stuff. But like, if we do it the right way, we can deliver great outcomes for a great deal of people. And I think that's what he put into his show. And I think that's what he put into his work, his emphasis on messaging, and I'm not the first person to say this. I think on the left, we do have a messaging problem, right? Like we really do. Just like I'm watching the way they're weaponizing critical race theory right now. It's brilliant. Like that shit sounds scary. Like, is it science? It's race? Like, what is this? Like, it's so brilliant how they're freaking doing this. Like, we're not as good as that. Instead, we come up with abolish the police. And it's like, wait, the last thing we abolished was like slavery. Like, are we just gonna just completely get rid of the institution? The police are like one of the last popular institutions left in America. And our messaging is abolish it. Like, you know what I mean? I think Mike was just so much more in tune with how to reach people in a way that made sense to them than we often are on the left. I just really think that was his brilliance, man. He could reach people. He could touch people, disarm them, and get them to understand that, you know, most of us are in this thing together.
Well, thanks so much for coming on today, man.
Thank you for having me, guys. Bless you guys. Love you guys. Obviously, I appreciate the work that you guys are continuing to do. I know we all miss Mike. I love him. I just think, you know, the guy was so freaking impactful. All we could do was just continue to try to strive to do that, you know, reach out to people, keep an open mind, keep an open heart, and keep our heads down and keep doing the work.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.